Sukumar Ray was a Bengali humorous poet, story writer and playwright. As perhaps the most famous Indian practitioner of literary nonsense, he is often compared to Lewis Carroll. His works such as the collection of poems Abultabul Hajabar Allah, short story collection Pugaladashu and play Shalashtash Anchari are considered nonsense masterpieces equal in stature to Alice in Wonderland, and are regarded as some of the greatest treasures of Bangla literature. More than 80 years after his death, Ray remains one of the most popular of children's writers in both West Bengal and Bangladesh. Sukumar Ray was the son of famous children's story writer Upendra Kishore Ray, Ray Chowdhury, and the father of legendary Indian filmmaker Satyajit Ray. Sukumar Ray was also known as the convener of Monday Club, a weekly gathering of like-minded people at the Ray residence, where the members were free to express their irreverent opinions about the world at large. A number of delightful poems were penned by Sukumar Ray in relation to the matters concerning Monday Club, primarily soliciting attendance, announcing important meetings etc. Ray was born in a Brahmo family in Calcutta, India. Born in the era which can be called the pinnacle of the Bengal Renaissance, he grew up in an environment that fostered his literary talents. His father was a talented writer of stories and popular science, painter and illustrator extraordinaire, musician and composer of songs, a pioneering technologist and hobbyist astronomer. Upendra Kishore was also a close friend of Rabindranath Tagore, who directly influenced Sukumar. Among other family friends were Jagadish Chandra Bose and Prafulla Chandra Roy. Upendra Kishore studied the technology of blockmaking, conducted experiments, and set up a business of making quality blocks. The firm MSU Ray & Sons, where Sukumar and his younger brother Subinay were involved. In 1906, Ray graduated with Hons. In physics and chemistry from the Presidency College, Kolkata. He was trained in photography and printing technology in England at the School of Photo Engraving and Lithography, London, and was a pioneer of photography and lithography in India. While in England, he also delivered lectures about the songs of Rabindranath before he, Tagore, won the Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, Sukumar had also drawn acclaim as an illustrator. As a technologist, he also developed new methods of half-tone blockmaking, and technical articles about this were published in journals in England. I am no exception. The writings of Sukumar Ray, 1887–1923, early 20th century literary genius whose son, Satyajit, later became famous as a filmmaker, are usually introduced to one when she or he is a child. It can safely be said that there will be very few persons who have first read Ray as an adult. Children have fun, roll on the floor laughing while going through the nonsensical descriptions in Ray's poems, stories and plays. In Calcutta's flagship annual book fair, parents are coming out of children's bookstores with Ray's collected works, or the poetry book, a Bol Tabel, is still a common sight. Once grown up, Ray's world might look closer to an Orwellian or Kafkaesque one. In the poem Baburam Sapuri, Baburam, the snake charmer, is requested to fetch a couple of harmless snakes so that they could be thrashed with a stick. The snakes had to be absolutely harmless. In Abak Jalpan, a play that children often stage at cultural events in their neighborhood, a very thirsty man keeps asking one person after another where he can get some water to drink, but everyone responds by telling a dozen irrelevant things except the answering what the man asked. Take, for example, the poem E Kushain, a coinage that has earned a proverbial stature to describe flawed laws. It says, in Lord Shiva's own land, the laws are catastrophic, as people are arrested for slipping, are produced before a qazi and punished with a fine of 21 rupees. A subsequent stanza says that the people who write and rhyme are put in cages, forced to listen to multiplication tables and made to calculate 21 pages of grocery expenses. When Ray was writing these pieces during the last leg of the second decade and the beginning of the third decade of the 20th century, they were conceived as nonsense. Afterwards, these pieces were discovered as socio-political commentaries, sometimes described as wicked satire. To me, he is the one who introduced the absurd in Bengali literature. The world I met in Ray's works returned when I read Albert Camus' The Myth of the Sisyphus or Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, said sexagenarian Bengali short story writer Tapinkar Bhattacharya. Remember, Ray predated Camus and Beckett. Bhattacharya had introduced his son, Samia, to Ray's writings at a tender age. When I used to read him up Ray's rhymes, he enjoyed them from a different perspective and I from another, Bhattacharya said. Another coinage that has earned a proverbial usage is Curacole, the title of a poem which can be described as the uncle's contraptions. There was an accompanying illustration by Ray himself that helps a reader understand the invention better. The machine was fastened to the shoulder of a man and had food dangling in front. However much one may chase the food, it can never be reached. According to film and literature critic Sanjoy Mukhopadhyay, Sukumar Ray's arrival in Indian literature is inexplicable and that he had no predecessor. Roy, Sukumar, 1887–1923, children's writer, was born in Kolkata on October 30, 1887. His family was originally from Masu in Mymensingh. His father, Upendra Kishore Roy Chowdhury, who also wrote for children, was a musician and mechanic, and his son was the Oscar-winning filmmaker Satyajit Ray. After passing the entrance examination from the city school, Sukumar Ray took his BSc, 1911, in chemistry from Presidency College. He then went to England on the Guru Prasanna Ghosh Scholarship to study photography and printing technology. Sukumar studied at the Manchester School of Technology, where he proved the effectiveness of photo printing in halftone invented by his father. At the East and West Society, Sukumar Roy read an essay called Spirit of Rabindranath, which was later published in the Quest magazine. This earned him the opportunity to speak at various meetings in England. He was selected Fellow of the Royal Photographic Society. He was the second Indian to earn this distinction. Back home in 1913, he took over his father's enterprise called U. Roy & Sons. Sukumar Roy was a versatile genius. He used to compose rhymes at an early age. Along with photography, he learned painting. While at college, he used to write comedies and act in them. He composed some songs during the Swadeshi movement and also sang the songs himself. After his father's death, he took over the Sandesh, a magazine published by his father. While in England, he sent stories, poems and paintings to be published in the magazine. While studying at Presidency College, he set up an organization called Nonsense Club and published the magazine Chade Batrish Baja as its mouthpiece. On his return from England, he started the Monday Club, where he used to arrange discussions along with refreshments, which earned the club another name, Manda, Bangla for Sweetmeat, Club. Sukumar Roy was principally noted for his writings for young children. He mixed comic elements and subtle satire in all his works, poems, plays, stories or paintings. His satire is marked by his social consciousness. His prominent writings include Abol Tabel, Nonsensical Mnemonics, 1923, Hayabar Allah, Topsy Turvy, 1928, Pugaladashu, 1940, Bahirapi, The Jester, 1944, Kai Kai, I Want More, 1950, Abak Jalpan, Strange Drink, Shabdakal Padram, The Tree of Words, and Jalapala, Irritation. He also wrote some serious essays in Bangla and English. He wrote a collection of belles lettres called Hesaramer Diary, written in the form of a diary. Sukumar Ray, October 30, 1887, September 10, 1923, was a Bengali writer and poet from the Indian subcontinent. He is remembered mainly for his writings for children. He was the son of children's story writer Upendra Kishore Ray Chowdhury and the father of Indian filmmaker Satyajit Ray. Upendra Kishore started a publishing firm, U. Ray & Sons, which Sukumar and Subbanay helped to run. While Sukumar went to England to learn printing technology, Upendra Kishore purchased land, constructed a building, and set up a printing press with facilities for high-quality half-tone color block making and printing. He also launched the children's magazine, Sandesh. Very soon after Sukumar's return from England, Upendra Kishore died, and Sukumar ran the printing and publishing businesses and the Sandesh magazine for about 8 years. His younger brother Subbanoy helped him, and many relatives pitched in writing for Sandesh. Apart from the cultural and creative activities, Sukumar Ray was also a young man who was a leader of the reformist wing in the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmo Samaj is the monotheistic Unitarian branch of Hinduism launched by Raja Rammohan Roy following the philosophy of the monotheistic Hindu scripture Isha Upanishad of 7th century BC. Sukumar Ray wrote a long poem Atitar Katha, which was a popular presentation of the history of the Brahmo Samaj. It was published as a small booklet to introduce the rationale of the Brahmo Samaj to children. Sukumar also campaigned to bring in Rabindranath Tagore, the most famous Brahmo of his time, as a leader of the Samaj. Sukumar Ray died on September 10, 1923 of severe infectious fever, leishmaniasis, for which there was no cure at the time. He left behind his widow and their only child, Satyajit. Satyajit Ray would later become the most well-known of Indian filmmakers and shoot a documentary on Sukumar Ray in 1987, 5 years before his own death. These are the first 4 lines of the poem titled Boy Payona Don't Be Afraid, I am not going to hurt you / believe me, I can't win at wrestling with you / I assure you I am too soft-hearted, there's not an ounce of anger in me / chewing you up is out of the question for me. Then, when the addressee shows no sign of trust despite further persuasions and pleading, comes the threat in the last 4 lines. Still not convinced, eh? How about I tie your feet down ? Don't make me mad or I'll sit tight on your head ! Be warned. I have my wife, my 9 sons along with me / all of us are going to bite you together if you insist on being foolish. This is perhaps one of the most popular poems in elocution competitions for children that are held in different parts of Bengal every year as part of cultural contests. As a child growing up in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, I had great fun practicing its rendition before participating in such contests. As a grown-up, though, I rediscovered the poem in the context of power and its behavior, the carrot and stick policy for an example. They placed it in the context of intolerance, arguing that the iconic stature of this play shows how the Bengali society had always accepted making fun of deities, such as Ram and Hanuman here, as integral to the culture. After studying chemistry and physics in 1906 from Presidency College, Calcutta, Sukumar went to the college in 1911 for higher education in the field of printing. There he studied photography and printing technology, and in time he debuted as India's leading photographer and lithographer. Sukumar returned to Calcutta in 1913. Sukumar, while studying in England, purchased the land of Upendra Kishores to set up a printing press to create and print high-quality colorful half-tone blocks. He started publishing this time, a monthly magazine, Sandesh for the children. Upendra Kishore died in a few days. But after the death of Upendra Kishore, Sukumar took over the charge of editing the magazine. A new section of Bengali children's literature started. Sukumar Ray's short life is seen in the best development of his talent. His writings, stories, and essays are still a milestone in Bengali childhood, while Sandesh is the editor. His gifted talent is unprecedented in his excellent rhyme. His first and only rhyme book, A Bultabul, is not only in Bangla literature but also for its own place in the field of world literature. After retreating to England, he had opened another club, called the Monday Club. In the weekly gathering of Monday Club, the members discussed everything from shoes to sewing to Sanapatatha. Sukumar Roy made some invites to this weekly meeting in the form of impressive clips, the contents of which were mainly the request of attendance and the announcement of the special meeting etc. In addition to the cultural and creative works, Sukumar was a young leader of the reformist group of Brahmo Samaj. Sukumar Roy wrote a poem titled The Past of the Past, which exposes the history of Brahmo Samaj in simple language. This poem is expressed in the form of a book form for the purpose of presenting the ideology of Brahmo Samaj among young people. Rabindranath Tagore, who was the most famous Brahmo of that time, patronized Sukumar for proposing the presidency of his Brahmo Samaj. At his time, literature, not only in Bengal but also globally, was governed by reason. They believed that nothing on earth existed which cannot be reasoned by reason. Ray introduced the logic of the irrational. Even the Surrealist movement started in 1924. But Ray had written Hajabar Allah by 1921-22. It's a surreal, absurd world, where nothing could be explained by reason, Mukhopadhyay said. Hajabar Allah, a story, begins with a cat turning into a handkerchief and ends with an absurd trial ending with the judge, an owl, ordering 30 days in jail and 7 days of fancy or death by hanging. Even though Ray's volume of work is quite thin given his short life of 36 years, everything can be compiled between 2 covers, there would be no dearth of examples. Physics research scholar Abhik Banerjee is often reminded of the scene from Hajabar Allah where the judge is seen sleeping, but when pointed out, he refutes and insists that he only had his eyes closed. Scenes from Hajabar Allah are perfect for political parodies or satires and would perfectly reflect the present times, said Banerjee, who also has a knack for theatre. Looking at political alliances that he thinks were inconceivable, such as the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP's alliance with the Jammu and Kashmir People's Democratic Party, or that of the Congress with Shiv Sena, Banerjee is reminded of the poem titled Khichdi, or Khichdi, which describes creatures like Bakachchap, a mix of heron and turtle, and Hanscharu, a mix of duck and porcupine. The poem ends with, "The lion is pained for not having horns/merger with deer gave him the horns." Ray self-illustrated his poems. His works have frequently been compared with the writings of Lewis Carroll, 1932-1898, and the art of Edward Lear, 1812-1888, with whose works Ray was acquainted. The trend of introducing children to Ray works continues. Journalist Avijit Gosal, whose son, Abhinandan, is 8.5 years old, gave his son Ray's collected works as the first Bengali book. Now studying in class 3 at an English medium school, Abhinandan has a poem by Ray in his Bengali syllabus. But he actually read his works before school. I enjoy reading it as much as he enjoys reading it. There are many lines and imageries from his work that I am frequently reminded of seeing today's socio-cultural and political developments, said Gosal, now in his 50s, who too had first read Ray in his early school days. "Every child has to read these as an adult," he said. During 2019 and 2020, when the BJP's and the Hindutva camp's principal slogan, Jai Shri Ram, were gaining popularity in West Bengal, it alarmed a section of those who can loosely be described as secular liberals. They brought forth in their social media discussions several images and scenes from Lakshman or Shaktashel, a play which can be described as a humorous adaptation of a scene from Ramayana. Sukumar Ray,